Today's story has a great contrast. Jacob, an introverted and insecure boy, undergoes a physical transformation, becoming strong and a werewolf. 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐬 and resistant, but his confident and charming werewolf partner, Hunter, a hunter, adores his new look and tries to make him accept it. Chapter 38. In the background, Margot and Anthony were frantically reaching out to Margot's parents, desperately seeking answers to Jacob's mysterious transformation. The absence of Anthony's parents, a topic shrouded in silence since their passing when Hunter was 11, hung heavy in the air. "I can't go home like this," Jacob murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, fear etched across his features. Hunter perched on the table before Jacob, his supportive nature shining through as he placed a comforting hand on his mate's knee. "Let's just be thankful that this happened here and not at home. I'm sure if you act normal around them and pretend like you've always been this way, they'll believe it. It's not like you were small before. You'll now be taller than my dad and my brother. They'll know," Jacob countered, his self-consciousness evident. "It's only by a few inches," Hunter said, moving to sit beside Jacob on the couch. A hint of attraction colored his voice as he added, "I like this change. Obviously, muscle is my weakness." Jacob's saddened gaze met Hunter's smile, a flicker of comfort passing between them. "Come on." Hunter stood, gently pulling Jacob to his feet. The newfound equality in their height was striking. "You should change." Jacob's eyes dimmed further as he felt Margot and Anthony's consterning gazes upon him. Once in Hunter's room, Margot and Anthony continued to stare at the closed door, their worry palpable. "Nobody else can know about this until we understand what in God's name is happening to that poor boy," Anthony said, running a hand through his hair. His determination to find answers was clear. "It's bad enough that this is happening with no warning, but without an explanation is a lost cause. How can we help him?" "Well, find answers. We have to," Margot replied softly, her maternal instinct kicking in as she empathized with Jacob's fear and confusion. Inside the room, Hunter rummaged through his closet, selecting a slightly oversized T-shirt that would accommodate Jacob's new muscular frame. As he turned, his jaw dropped at the sight of Jacob removing his shirt, revealing his newly sculpted physique. Hunter's pupils dilated, a shiver of pleasure coursing through him as Jacob's transformed body, his attraction unmistakable. "Jacob, you are so hot." He walked over and gave him the top. "If you don't embrace this, perfectionist, then I'll do it for you." "Perfectionist," Jacob mumbled into Hunter's disappointment, pulled the T-shirt over his bare body. He rubbed his eyes. "I want to change back. I don't like it." "Well, I do. And if I'm honest, I don't think you can change back. This has obviously happened for a reason. You're not meant to be anything other than powerful. Clearly. But why? I don't want to be like this. I know you don't because you don't have an explanation. That electricity stuff was just weird. But it's not happening for fun. There's a bigger purpose going on and I'm sure we'll find out eventually." Hunter then turned and tucked up some black shorts. "Put these on. They'll be comfortable to sleep in and they'll fit you." He understood that Jacob had serious confidence issues, so he turned and allowed him to change, as much as he wanted to watch. Privacy for Jacob was key until he was comfortable within himself. Hunter also knew that he was too strongly attracted to him sometimes, but his mate gave off a very intense and irresistible scent. He couldn't stop himself from being so affectionate. He turned around when he was finished and walked over. He grabbed his wrist and turned him to face the mirror. Jacob instantly looked away. You need to look. Hunter stood behind him, held on to his strong arms and rested his chin against his shoulder. "You need to see how amazing you are." Jacob took a breath. His heart was beating fast, but the werewolf was right. He couldn't stay in denial. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at his new appearance. His eyebrows instantly raised. He was muscular and did look rather powerful. However, this would most definitely not go to Jacob's head. It isn't possible for someone who's so timid and shy to gain an ego. He constantly questions how he looks and whether 𝐊𝐲's good enough. You're perfect, Hunter whispered. Every inch of you. The mirror was body length so Jacob could get a good glance. You're looking more like a werewolf now. Hunter continued with a smile, without the wolf part. Jacob opened his mouth but closed it again. He didn't have anything negative to say about himself for once, but admitting that he liked his body out loud would feel like too much. Why? It's not a bad thing to love yourself. Hunter turned him back around to face him. I'm not quite there yet, Jacob whispered. Hunter smiled and rested a gentle hand on the side of his face. One day you will, and I can't wait until you look at your reflection and smile because you feel good. There's nothing better than loving yourself, but you won't understand the benefits until you feel it personally. Hunter is very wise. He understands that he received characteristic from his mother. I can't wait until that day too, Jacob whispered. He stared into Hunter's beautiful mystic gray eyes, finding it easier to keep that essential eye contact. Hunter ran a hand through the back of his mate's hair and watched how his pupils grew. He loved that he liked it and how he has found something which makes Jacob's affection spark. He then gently pulled him over to his bed. He was going to kiss him. He couldn't take advantage when he was feeling low. I'm going to change into my wolf. His voice was soft and felt like silk filling Jacob's ears, who nodded. Hunter took off his shirt and effortlessly changed. Jacob stared down at his huge and beautiful form before he jumped onto the bed and sprawled across it. Lay with me. His voice boomed in Jacob's head. The sides of his lips curled towards a smile but didn't quite make it as he climbed onto the bed. He shuffled closer and with a bit of hesitation. He rested his head against the wolf's side. Hunter so desperately wanted to lift his mood, and he knew he was really warming up to his wolf. He let out a quiet and content howl, making Jacob look up and connect eyes with him. He could feel how relaxed Hunter was, but it was the first time he had heard him do that. Strangely, it really settled him too, almost like it was in tune with his emotions. When 10:30 rolled around on the clock, 𝐴nthony knocked on Hunter's bedroom door before opening it. He was about to tell them to go to bed, but was surprised to see Hunter's wolf form sprawled out across it. Jacob was curled up against him and also fast asleep. This day must have really taken the energy out of them. Margot whispered and glanced into the room. Come on. Let them sleep. She silently closed the door, wishing them good dreams. Boys. 𝐴nthony found himself knocking on their door once again. However, this time, it was 7:30 in the morning. Get up. You've got college in half an hour. He thought about keeping them out of college today to allow Jacob to come to terms with his change, but other people needed to get used to it as well. When he heard silence, he opened the door to see Hunter back in his human form. They were both curled up against each other and deep in sleep. 𝐴nthony smiled. Seeing his son like this with someone was sweet, and he really did deserve a mate after his patchy childhood. Boys. His booming voice woke them both, and Jacob was a little startled. He was waking up in a new place with a new voice yelling at him to get out of bed. He quickly sat up, almost knocking Hunter onto the floor, who groaned and rubbed his eyes. This was the first time in a week where his chest didn't ache and his head didn't throb. Actually, Jacob felt great this morning, and sleeping allowed his body to get used to the quick change. However, his eyes are not yet adjusted to his body. Get ready. We're going in half an hour. He smiled before shutting the door. Hunter frowned until he felt his mate climb over him. He quickly turned and pulled him back on top of him. Jacob was heavy, but he gripped him tight. Don't go. He spoke in his husky morning voice, melting his mate. You're my only source of warmth. Jacob yawned but pulled himself up. If you get up, you won't need my warmth. He mumbled and climbed out of bed. Hunter turned and eyed him up and down. I can't wait to show you off at college today. His grin was cheeky, but Jacob turned with wide eyes. What if my brother sees me? Don't worry. This forced Hunter to face the cool breeze circulating his room. It was the first night in a while where he wasn't overheating with clothes on. He needs to see you at some point. Remember, just act completely normal. I feel a bit sick. Jacob said when Sam came sprinting over to the 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧 truck. They were parked outside the college. He beamed when Hunter climbed out. He ignored Sam and turned to his mate. "Don't worry. I'm going to be with you all day." Jacob frowned and opened his mouth. "And yes, I'm skipping my lessons to be with you. Don't argue." He moved when Jacob sighed and also climbed out of the truck, making Sam stop and stare at him. "Jacob, you look different this morning." His eyes examined him, not really knowing why until it hit him all of a sudden. "Where you like I don't know. Not bursting out of your T-shirt with muscles like that." Hunter gave him a death stare, making Sam instantly regret opening his mouth. Jacob furrowed his eyebrows and started to fidget. He felt extremely worried now. "Why is that a bad thing?" Sam asked quietly. Also, why are you suddenly the same height as?" Hunter turned and lifted his hand. Sam flinched and quickly edged away, not wanting to be hit. "Stop talking. Right now," he said through gritted teeth. Sam glanced at Hunter's parents, who motioned for him to come over. They were going to explain this the best they could. Hunter took Jacob's hand and intertwined fingers. "Don't freak out. Don't put your hoodie on. Just be confident and allow people to get used to this, okay?" Jacob took a breath and nodded. There was no way around it. Oh, so he had like a crazy growth spurt. Is it related to that crazy healing thing he did? Sam questioned. "We don't know what's causing it yet, but the best thing to do is just carry on like normal." Sam nodded with a smile and turned towards his alpha's mate. "You look great though, Jacob. You're putting the alpha to shame." He chuckled. Hunter clenched his jaw. "Sam," he growled. "Sorry. You both look great." Sam smiled nervously. Hunter rolled his eyes and started walking towards college with a very anxious-looking mate. "Just don't look at anyone. You'll be fine," he said quietly when they walked through the glass doors. People were watching them, but Hunter thought it was due to their hands that were tightly locked together. They didn't see William on their short walk to the classroom. People were standing outside that had been in Jacob's classes all year. They were glancing at him with confused frowns. Jacob was very good at avoiding people's gaze, but he could feel Hunter's on him. Heavy in his heart. Panic was rising. He has suppressed a breakdown for too long, and now, with people staring at him and judging him, he could no longer keep one down. Hunter could just about feel it and let go of his hand. He rested it on his shoulder and stood very close. "I know it's not the right thing to do to skip college, but you should have stayed off today." He spoke quietly and glared at a girl who was staring Jacob up and down, clearly liking his change. "Do you want to go to the field?" Jacob nodded. He hated what was happening to him. He felt so out of his depth. Hunter stood up straight and went to take his hand again, but quickly pulled it back. "Oh, you gave me an electric shock." His voice trailed off and his eyes grew slightly bigger, as did Jacob's. They glanced at each other with instant worry. Surely another change wouldn't happen. Not here. Not now. Would it? Chapter 39. "Let's go to the bathroom," Hunter said when all the students started piling into the classroom. He didn't touch his mate in case he electrocuted him. Jacob turned and quickly walked down the corridor. The ringing in his ears became louder again. His heart thumped in his chest and his palms grew sweaty. He didn't want to change. Not again. "Relax," Hunter murmured and pushed the door open. Jacob hurried in and was very thankful to see that the toilets were empty. Hunter stood next to the door so nobody could come in and studied his panicked mate. "Jacob, take deep breaths, okay? It might make it worse if you panic." Jacob tried, but it was getting louder. He could feel the energy building up around him again. The static noise started to overtake Hunter's thoughts like it did last time. "I'm scared." He breathed and gripped the sink. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes were stressed and his forehead creased into a worried frown. The werewolf wanted to comfort his mate, but he needed to make sure nobody entered. And how was he supposed to comfort him? He didn't have a clue what was happening, and that was more daunting than anything else. "I know, and it's okay to be scared, but I won't let anything bad happen to you. This is your body. Try and stay calm." The noise then hit Jacob at full force, making him crouch and cover his ears. It was unbearable once again. He felt helpless and almost alone. Nobody knew what was happening to him. Therefore, nobody could help. He gasped for air and allowed a whimper to slip past his lips. Hunter's heart broke. He just wanted to hug him and make it better, but he was stuck to the spot and paralyzed by the unknown. Jacob rested his head on the ground and squeezed his eyes shut. The cold tiles numbed his skin while the rest of his body pulsed. He was tense and he could feel a force flowing through him. He was shaking and breathing hard. His mind felt like it was being opened and rummaged through. He felt like he was growing mentally this time, not physically. "It hurts," he whispered and kept back his tears. It was so painful. With 𝐊𝐤𝐧𝐽, happening. Hunter's eyebrows furrowed and he slowly lowered himself to the ground. He kept his back against the wood and door and watched. His chest felt strange and he breathed heavily. "Stay strong," he soothed, trying to calm him and also keep himself composed. "You're tough enough to get through this." However, he didn't know if that was true or not. He then saw the faint flicker of a yellow light coming from his palms. The crackle of electricity filled the toilets and he was concerned that someone would hear. As strange as it was, Hunter couldn't help but become mesmerized by it. Jacob was making this magical force happen. Somehow, Jacob has never felt more petrified. This was beyond normal, even though there was a werewolf sitting in the room with him. He was the weird one. He cried out when a huge surge of electricity forced through his body and he scrunched up into a ball. He was violently shaking and trying to keep himself together. Hunter was now low-key freaking out. His mate was in pain and a lot of danger. He didn't know how far this change would go and he didn't know how to stop it. He had given off a subconscious threat call to his pack members who were now standing outside the toilets. Sam had tried to enter, but obviously, Hunter was in the way of the door. Suddenly, he then sensed something within his mate that he never thought 𝐻ED sense. It hit his body like a wave and he very nearly choked from shock. He sensed a wolf. He gasped when it grew stronger. It looked like Jacob's body was trying to change, but it was stopped by an unknown barrier. However, he was just a werewolf. He had too much power. Hunter was so confused. He couldn't possibly be in this situation. He was just a simple human. Sam and Harrison had their ears pressed up against the door and tried to connect a mind link with their alpha, but it was being blocked. They could hear muffled crackling and someone crying. Jacob then took a huge breath of air and felt that the force had taken over. He could no longer think for himself until it suddenly happened. Whatever his body was trying to do succeeded. Hunter felt like a simple blink of his eyes missed what happened when everything instantly went quiet. A white room was no longer filled with the strange electrical forces, but it was replaced by something rather surprising. The next thing he knew, he was no longer staring at Jacob, but he was staring at a wolf, lying on the floor. However, it was just a wolf. It was the size of a small pup. He frowned and rubbed his eyes. Was he going crazy? He looked again to see the pup-like wolf shaking with utter fright. "What the hell?" he whispered to himself and pinched his own cheek, but still, his mate's human form had been replaced. Jacob. The miniature wolf's head snapped his way, and that's when he could hear his thoughts. "Hunter, please, 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 help me. I help me. Hunter." Hunter quickly stood up with wide eyes. His extreme fear felt like a kick in the head and he quickly ran to his aid. "Okay, calm down." He spoke softly and watched him with disbelief. "Hunter, help me. Please. I can't change back." His voice was very panicked. "What am I?" The werewolf tilted his head to the side, but his eyes were glowing. A smile crept its way onto his lips until he was grinning from ear to ear. His cheeks went pink and his eyebrows raised. "I can't believe it." He picked him up and his fur was so soft and tender. Jacob's pup form was trembling and he was whimpering quietly. "Don't panic. You'll change back once you calm down." He lifted the little wolf out in front of him and examined this extraordinary change. He was white, showing that he was an alpha's mate. His eyes were big and deep chocolate like his human eyes as it continued to show a tunnel to the soul. However, He was just plain white like all alpha dogs. He had one deep silver ear and his left back paw was silver too. He had a deep swirl imprinted onto his fur that ran along his back. His tail was between his legs and Hunter's heart throbbed at how adorable he was. Yet, he let out a rather troubled yelp and his ears were flat against his head. Clearly, he was absolutely terrified. "What's happening to me?" Hunter could hear his distress and cradled him in his arms. Just as the door to the bathroom opened, he turned to see Sam looking at him with worried eyes. "You're changed into a wolf," he thought calmly before his beta spoke. "What happened, Alpha?" He sent out really strong vibes. "We thought you were in trouble." He then saw the little pup in his arms and started to frown. "Why do you have?" Oh my God, he could smell Jacob and that only left one explanation. "No way." Hunter grinned. He thinks that because Jacob is so timid, shy and always full of anxiety, he changed into a pup because it matched that side of his personality. It filled him with a lot of excitement. Now he could play with his mate when they were in their wolf form. They could connect on an even deeper level and show their bear qualities. Muscles are his weakness, but so were cute things, and a diminutive wolf was definitely that and more. His eyes had glossed over with utter love, but his mate was freaking out so much. They had to get him home so he could calm down enough to change back. "Mom," he thought in his head after connecting with his parents. "Get to the college right now." Something happened with Jacob. He then turned to his astonished friends. "Let's go." Hunter walked out of the bathroom with his pack quickly following behind. They all took it in turns to stare at Jacob, who would be sobbing hard if he was human. Hunter gently rubbed his belly, trying to get him to calm down, but it was no use. He was going to make himself sick if he didn't settle down soon. There was still something very, very odd about this change. He couldn't just change into a wolf from being a human. But that left Hunter thinking about his other form. Maybe that wasn't human. Maybe it was something else. It was definitely much more powerful. What could it be? When they reached the glass doors, people had given Hunter funny looks or swooned over such a cute pup in his arms. People thought it was a dog, but it was definitely a wolf. It was almost twice the size of a cat with big paws and floppy ears that were still flat against his head. They only had to wait around 10 minutes until Hunter's parents quickly pulled up in their truck. Hunter hurried over an explanation. He climbed in the back. Anthony was gulping at what he was carrying. "Okay." He breathed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is getting out of hand." Margot watched too with eyes wide. "Is that?" "Yes, it's Jacob." He sighed while Sam climbed in and the rest of Hunter's pack started running towards the trees. They would run to his house in their wolf form. Jacob's little claws were digging into Hunter's belly as he let his shaking body curl up against him. "Now can we please go? I feel like 𝐊𝐲𝐺 going to have a nervous wee on me or something." When they reached Hunter's home, they all quickly climbed out. Hunter had managed to calm his mate by saying that it really was that strange. However, it was. The fact that he was very small was as odd as the change itself. But now that Jacob was a little calmer, he suddenly changed back, causing himself and Hunter to fall against the soft grass at the sudden weight transformation. They took a moment to breathe as Hunter's face rested in his hair. But Jacob quickly sat up and examined himself. When he saw that he was now human, he completely broke down. Hunter sat up and watched his eyes grow watery. He covered his face and cried into his hands. "I don't want this." He sobbed as Hunter wrapped his arms around him. He had a pained look on his face. "I don't want this life." He was very overwhelmed, but rightfully so. Hunter didn't have anything to say. His mate was special, very special. But of course, he was also very, very fragile, and this situation was way out of his reach. He couldn't cope. Margot stood back with Anthony and Sam. They felt really bad for him and knew they had a lot to explain now that he could change into a wolf. Sam was excited. He wanted to teach Jacob everything he knew about hunting. Although it might be hard for him judging by his little wolf size. "I have a theory," Margot whispered. "Go on," Anthony whispered back. "I feel like his human form was never really human. He is half wolf and half of something else. The only way we can find out is if we question his family. They have to have had wolf blood at some point. But I think that's why 𝐿𝐲's just a pup, because 𝐿𝐲's only half. What about the other half of him then? If it's not human, what is it? I'm not sure, she whispered. But I can see now that there are two parts of his personality. His shy and timid self is his wolf. Just like how Hunter's excited, powerful and curious side is his wolf. But Jacob's other side of him that we haven't really seen must be whatever else he is. I am a freak. I am a freak. Jacob sobbed into his mate's shoulder. Hunter frowned and pulled his head back. I don't want you to ever call yourself that again. Do you hear me? He said sternly and stared hard into his water-filled eyes. He has heard people call him that for a year, and he despised the word with everything he had. You may be very different, but in no way are you a freak. He cuddled him again, and Jacob held him tight. He breathed in his comforting smell and allowed his sorrow to spill onto him. His family do need to know about this, though. Anthony sighed. I didn't want it to go this far, but it's not fair for Jacob to hide it. He was still yet to announce his son's mate to the werewolves who live in the... Margot rubbed her forehead with an interested frown. Her husband looked down and tilted his head. What is it? He questioned. I think. It's just a thought, and that could be wrong, but what if Jacob's other form is? No, it's silly. No, go on. Anthony stared at her. He read her mind, but he wanted her to say it out loud. Well, what if his other form requires a gift? Like myself. What if part of his soul is shared with a god? That would explain the electricity. He could be half wolf and half 𝐿𝐲𝐸, the god of lightning. Chapter 40. Jacob, please let me in. Hunter sighed. He was sitting on the floor, just outside his bedroom. Jacob was sitting on the other side of the door with his back pressed up against it. After breaking down on the grass outside, he needed some alone time and ran into Hunter's room. He was stronger now and was just able to hold Hunter back without him truly forcing his way in. Now, half an hour later, the werewolf was beginning to feel a little heated about the situation. Son, I think he needs longer by himself. It's not a bad thing for mates to have a moment to breathe alone. You should go outside and talk to your pack about it. They need to know what's going on. Hunter frowned at his mom and stood up. What do you expect me to tell them when I have no idea what is going on? Just tell them that Jacob is okay, but 𝐿𝐲's not okay. Is he? Hunter scowled. 𝐿𝐲's freaking out and I can't even give him answers. It's my fault that he has been dragged into this mess. Hunter, calm down. 𝐿𝐲's just overwhelmed. I'll get used to it. Anthony butted in. He doesn't need you to be stressed on top of all his worries. Hunter turned and knocked on his bedroom door again, making Jacob jump. Will you please just let me talk to you? I can feel that you're not in a good place and you shouldn't be on your own. Jacob pulled his knees up to his chest and buried his head against them. He wanted to run away somewhere far. Leave me alone, he said loud enough for Hunter to hear. He clenched his jaw and rubbed his eyes. He took a big breath to calm himself down. Okay, he said in a nicer tone. I'm going for a run, so I'll leave you for an hour or two. If you may, my parents will be here. Jacob closed his eyes. His body was tense. When he heard Hunter's footsteps leave, he stood up and slowly walked over to his bed. He climbed under the duvet and curled up into a ball. He could smell him and his chest felt a little lighter. He couldn't believe he changed into a wolf. It felt so odd. He was 100% himself, but his body was different. He didn't know how to use his legs. He couldn't speak or do anything. But now that he had made that change, his senses felt sharper and strong. Hunter's smell was driving him insane. He loved it. Maybe his strong jealousy over him was just him being territorial. He pressed his face into the pillow and allowed a few tears to melt into it. He just wanted to be human. Why was that too much to ask for? Almost 3 hours had passed by and Jacob woke up to the sound of birds chirping. He stretched and opened his eyes in confusion. His mind was empty and clear when he was faced with almost darkness. He slowly rolled onto his back and felt the soft fabric of something brush against his face. All of a sudden, the memories of what happened to him flooding back. His heart spiked in his chest. He had been crying on Hunter's bed and he must have fallen asleep. He was still under his covers. Slowly he pulled the duvet from his face and sat up sleepily. His eyes instantly caught sight of a tall figure. Hunter was stood, leaning against the doorframe and watching his mate with a peaceful twinkle in his eye. His run really helped him to calm down. There was just something about sprinting at full speed with the wind running through his fur and him feeling his muscles working and burning that encouraged him. Jacob stared at him. He too felt a little better after passing out. "We're quite different, aren't we?" Hunter questioned with a smile. "I go for a run to clear my head. You sleep to clear your head. Maybe you'll learn to love running with me, but I'm not sure how far your little wolf legs will take you." Jacob started to wring his hands together. He wasn't sure how he felt about hearing someone talk about his wolf yet. "I like that we're different." He continued and walked over to the bed. "It keeps things interesting." He sat down and watched Jacob chew on his bottom lip. He loved it when he did that. Jacob whispered and stared at his hands. "Why is my wolf?" He stopped and almost cringed. It sounded wrong coming out of his mouth. Hunter was patient and stayed quiet and still, not wanting to distract him. "Why is my wolf so small?" "My parents think it's because you're only half a werewolf. But I think it's to match your personality. Will I grow and be big like you?" "I'm not sure," Hunter said with a smile. "I don't think so. But honestly, your wolf form is amazing. You had these special patches of silver and you were so cute." Jacob felt a tiny bit intrigued. He wanted to see what his wolf form looked like. "Why don't you change so you can see and get used to it?" He quickly shook his head and curved his eyebrows into a frown. "I'm not ready. He had to at least come to terms with it first." "But is that why my body grew because I'm a half werewolf?" Hunter then shuffled on the bed a little bit and his eyes grew more serious. "Not exactly." Margot had explained her theory to him and he didn't really believe in the gods, but it's the closest explanation they have so far. "Let's not worry about it just yet. You should have some lunch and then my mom wants to talk to you." He stood up when Jacob slowly climbed out of bed. He stretched, causing his shirt to rise and Hunter's eyes to happily examine his muscles. But he caught sight of himself in the mirror and stopped. He pulled his shirt back down but continued to stare. He never thought HED looked this muscular because that required too much working out. However, he was starting to feel a little less shy in the eyes of Hunter. "You know I like it," he spoke, making him look at him in the mirror. "And I'm going to keep telling you until you believe it." Hunter stepped closer and seductively ran his fingers down the front of his shirt, feeling his washboard DBS. Jacob didn't move and instead, he watched his eyes. Hunter took his hands and placed them on his waist as he took another step forwards. He placed his own hands on Jacob's shoulders and ran them down his arms, feeling every ounce of perfection. "You're flawless," he whispered and rested his chest against his, but he frowned and looked down. "Jacob, you're putting my pecs to shame." Jacob's eyes glistened. "Sorry, don't be sorry." He chuckled. "I like it." Hunter brought his face in close until he could feel the heat radiating from his lips. Usually, HED tell him if he would kiss him, but right now, they both really wanted one. In fact, Jacob craved one and it felt much stronger than before. Hunter could feel his affection over his own for once and didn't hesitate to connect their lips together. Jacob accepted it very quickly and gripped his waist. Hunter gently pushed their bodies together and slowly wrapped his arms around his shoulders when he kissed him again. He was gentle and calm, even though he wanted to make out with him until their lips fell off. He cowed him because Jacob would stress. However, having part of his wolf's soul exposed now made things feel a little stronger for him. Their lips were so perfectly in sync, but the affection kept growing. Jacob subconsciously wrapped his arms around Hunter's back and held him strongly. It was strange for Hunter to feel almost dominated by his size, but he knew he was confident enough to take over. One day, maybe he would be the one to control these moments, and he was okay with that. Mostly, to their surprise, the kissing became a little less gentle. Hunter had dared to kiss with more passion and Jacob was following his lead. He wanted it as he enjoyed his warmth and that excited spark in his heart. Hunter nodded his hand into the back of his mate's hair, knowing that was his soft spot. Jacob gripped him tighter and the kiss was pulled deeper by Hunter yet again. Things were quickly steaming up and Jacob was freaking out. He couldn't believe he was doing this. He was actually making out with someone. But it felt special, very personal, which was the key for becoming stronger and building that trust. They were developing as mates but still managing to take things slow. They were beginning to taste one another and Hunter very nearly transferred his tongue into the wrong mouth. He was more than sure Jacob would pull away. His mate's kissing did need a little bit of practice, but he'd get there with time. Hunter would gladly guide him in that direction. When he moved his arms and slowly slid them down Jacob's back, he shivered with pleasure and their bodies molded perfectly together. Hunter was cheeky and very slowly lifted the bottom of his t-shirt. But as soon as Jacob felt his fingers against his skin, he pulled back. They were breathing hard with moist lips that also tingled and tasted like each other. Hunter cursed himself. He wanted to continue but took it too far. "It's okay," Jacob breathed with rosy red cheeks. Just one step at a time." Hunter nodded and leaned back in to steal one more kiss before lifting a hand and playfully ruffling his hair. Jacob pulled away with a beautiful smile. His belly then roared with hunger, making the full werewolf shake his head. "Oh, I see what you really pulled away for. I can't believe I have to compete with food." Jacob bit his lip. He was feeling much happier and very at ease now. Food will always come first. He turned and headed for the door, leaving Hunter with a big frown. He slapped a hand against his chest and pretended to look hurt. "How could you say such a thing?" He chuckled and followed him out of the room. Jacob quickly stopped when he saw someone he didn't recognize, causing Hunter to walk straight into him. He followed his gaze and saw someone who he loved with all his heart. It was an old woman with long gray hair that was tied into a plait. She was short and petite with a long summer dress on and bright yellow Wellington boots. "Hunter, my boy, come and give your grandmother a kiss." He walked over with a big smile and surprisingly to Jacob. He kissed her cheek and hugged her tight. He could feel the love he had for her and it was really lovely to see. "Hi, Anna," he said as she patted his back. "I've missed you so much." She beamed and pulled away so she could look at him. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "My handsome grandson." Jacob wished he had a relationship like this with his grandparents. It did hurt a little that they had no time for him. Hunter's grandmother then gave him a frown and she smacked his cheek. "Hey," he said and stood up straight. "What was that for?" "For not telling me about your mate." She spoke and looked over to Jacob. Her eyes instantly returned back to the kind and loving soul she was. "And for treating him poorly. Shame on you. Margot must have told her about everything that has been going on." Hunter crossed his arms and looked down to the ground. He still felt really bad for doing what he did to him. And he hasn't forgiven him yet. He can feel it. She then walked over to a very nervous-looking Jacob. He was fidgeting and avoiding her gaze without looking too rude. But Margot had also told her mother about him and his character. "Hello, love." She spoke softly and had that angelic voice, just like her daughter. Flora. Margot's mother and Hunter's grandmother. It's such a pleasure to finally meet his mate." He glanced at her with half a smile. "Hi," he whispered. "I am Jacob." Flora expressed a big smile. Her eyes examined him and she nodded like she was confirming something with herself. She then turned and faced her daughter and her husband. 𝐊𝐲 definitely built like a god. He looks powerful and I can sense a greater purpose around him. However, he lacks severe confidence, which is the main thing we need to focus on. Jacob frowned and stared at Hunter. Did she just say? Chapter 41. Jacob. Hunter spoke slowly when his eyes started growing. Don't freak out. We don't actually know yet." Flora turned to see him slowly beginning to panic. "Hey now, love. If someone said that to me, I'd be ecstatic. I know you're not used to any of this, but it's about time you start being in the right mindset." She walked over and took his hands. She felt them beginning to tremble and wondered why someone who was so fragile received such a precious gift. Obviously. It is for a reason and she had no right to question it. Allowing those negative thoughts will eat away at your positive ones. What's stressing you out about this? Jacob stared into her soulful eyes. He tried listening to her words, but he was feeling like a thin layer of ice. If any pressure was applied, he would crumble in seconds. I just want to be human, he whispered. This feels like too much. Hunter connected his fingers together and studied him. He was holding a lot on his shoulders and he wished that they could share the load. Being introduced to our world is the most amazing opportunity you will ever receive. Flora beamed and squeezed his hands. I understand that you entered it on bad terms. She turned and glared at her grandson. Hunter sighed and glared back. But we're all here to guide you through it. You are very special and I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. But you were never just a human, or if one at all. Flora let him go and sat down at the table. She helped herself to a biscuit and left her words circling in Jacob's head. Was he never human? His whole body suddenly felt like a chaotic mystery. Hunter's mind was blown up by a series of tense thoughts, all coming from his mate. He quickly walked over and took his arms. Calm down, he whispered. Jacob frowned. He barely heard him. His mind was on fire. How could he have never been a simple human? Where are the explanations and the proof? Why was everyone else so calm about this when he couldn't cope with the simple idea of it? It's really not that bad. I mean, it is just a theory. It's not that bad. Jacob frowned. His patience had snapped. Are you being serious? Yes, Hunter rested a hand on his shoulder, but he pushed it away. Jacob, please don't be like this. What? Why do you all expect me to be fine? I changed into a wolf today. I shot you with an electric thing and you say it's not that bad. You know how I feel. Why do you not care? I do care. That's a little unfair. We don't know what's happening to you, so the only thing we can tell you to do is to stay calm and try to get used to it. Don't get angry at me. I'm only trying to help. Why do I have to be your mate? Jacob sighed and rubbed his eyes. Hunter crossed his arms and stared at him with no emotion. Would you rather just forget about it all? He sounded hurt. Yes, I would. Jacob snapped and looked around for his shoes. I would rather think that I was crazy with a voice in my head than be dragged into this. He pulled on his shoes as Hunter watched, not really knowing what to do. When his mate turned to leave, he grabbed his arm, but Jacob tensed and pulled away. I have no idea who I am. I have no idea where my life is going and I have no control over anything. Jacob was angry and he couldn't keep it hidden. Now I have to go home and pretend like everything is fine. Do you know how hard that is? You don't have to go home just yet. Not when you're this mad. Jacob's eyes were building up a storm and Hunter didn't like the tone. Just take a breath. You've been through a lot. Yes, I have been through a lot. Sorrow rose in his eyes, but only for a moment. And it's your fault. I don't feel like I can forgive you for any of it. You dragged me through hell just because you were scared about what your parents would think. You're a pathetic Hunter. Jacob turned with a deep frown and stormed towards the door. Hunter didn't try to stop him. He felt like he had been stabbed in the heart. Anthony, Margot, and Flora turned to look at him when the front door slammed shut. He looked very anguished and he felt like he had been stamped on all over his body. But he was angry too. You know what? He muttered and stormed towards the door. You can't say that to me. Hunter, Hunter. Anthony yelled, but he stomped down the steps and followed his mate. How dare you call me pathetic? He growled when Jacob turned. They were both glaring at each other. I've tried so hard to be here for you and you've just thrown it back in my face. You haven't helped me. You've made it worse. Jacob ran a hand through his hair. I feel sick at the thought of going home after my body changed. All you do is express how attracted you are to me. You don't care about how I really feel at all. How can you say that? Hunter yelled. I care so much. It hurts me when you struggle and I can't stand it when you're sad. I've given you so much and even some space to allow this to process. Why are you being so horrible to me? I've apologized and you know how terrible I feel. It's not fair to blame everything on me. I can't help that you were born with these qualities. Jacob's eyes studied him hard. But sometimes this happens. He felt so worthless and he was so done with life that everything started to lose its meaning. He started pushing things that he cares about away because he didn't feel good enough. The werewolf fest world was too great for a lonely loser like him. He then turned and started walking away. Everything was silent and he stopped caring about what he was doing. He just had to walk and not stop until he stopped hurting. Jacob. Hunter frowned and started to march after him, but his dad held him back. Just let him go, he said softly. Your pack will follow him and keep him safe, but… No, Hunter. He spoke sternly. You both need to calm down. Jacob stood outside his house. His heart was beating fast and he was still in a horrible mindset. He had started to feel guilty about saying bad things to Hunter and starting an unnecessary argument. He looked down to his hands and sighed with sadness. Hunter had switched off their mind link because they continued to argue even when he was walking home. He felt very lonely, yet he couldn't help but think that he deserved it. He took a big breath of air and opened the front door. He could hear talking and his parents' cars were on the drive, indicating that everyone was home. He swallowed his fear when his mother walked out of the kitchen with a pie in her hands. Jacob's belly growled, but now was not the time to think about food. She glanced at him with a surprised smile until her eyes examined his body and the smile started to fade. Hi, son. I didn't think you'd be back today. What are you frowning at? He questioned quietly. He was fidgeting with his fingers and wishing that he wore a hoodie. Well, Jacob. Scott questioned with the same surprised smile. However, his eyes were examining him with uncertainty. You're back. Sooner than expected. He was obviously distracted by something. What are you both frowning at? Well, have you had a growth spurt or something? His dad questioned, not remembering him being quite that big and quite that tall. No, Jacob shrugged. Well, I don't know. Maybe a little. Grace shrugged it off. The pie in her hands was starting to get hot to hold. Are you staying? We're just about to put dinner on the table. She beamed and hurried to place it down. Scott continued to stare at him. Your grandparents are still here. Why are you back early? He asked kindly but found it unusual to look up to him. Jacob pursed his lips. He didn't know what to say and it felt weird for his dad's eyes to be slightly judging him for the first time in his life. We had an argument. It seemed to distract Scott's mind instantly. Did you? Was it a serious one? You haven't broken up, have you? Jacob shook his head. We haven't broken up. But it was mainly my fault. I started it. Scott sighed and rested a hand on his shoulder. His eyes examined his body again, but he didn't mention anything. Best to give it another hour or two. Then I suggest calling him. If you feel like you need to apologize, then do just that. Don't let it stay tense between you both. Okay. Jacob nodded. He has never received relationship advice from his parents and it felt really to know that they are here for him. Thanks, Dad, he mumbled. Scott smiled. He understood him completely. Right? Do you want some food? Yes, I'm really hungry. As always. He chuckled as they made their way to the dining table, but Jacob froze when he saw Alicia sitting next to his brother. His heart thumped and he tensed. His grandparents and William frowned and looked him up and down. His change was obvious, but they didn't quite know why. Alicia glared at him for a split second before he quickly looked away, not liking it one bit. Actually, I'm going to pass on food. He mumbled and quickly walked out. Scott heard his footsteps make their way upstairs. Jacob quickly shut his bedroom door behind him and flopped onto his bed. He sighed, thankful that he was out of any human interactions, but he quickly shuddered at that thought. He couldn't get used to the theory of him not being a full human. It was just crazy. He rolled onto his back, but suddenly, he started to hear that high-pitched static noise, ringing in his ears. No, he breathed and quickly sat up. He pushed himself into the corner of his bed and closed his eyes. Please don't change. The noise grew louder and he started to feel the energy once more. He rocked slightly and covered his ears. Tried to fight it, but he didn't know how. Just then, His whole body felt completely different, and the static noise stopped as quickly as it came. He opened his eyes to find himself much closer to the bed. He looked down and saw paws instead of hands. He had changed into his wolf form. Instant panic ran through him, and he pushed himself further into the corner of the bed. Oh God, what do I do? But Hunter wasn't listening, and he walked around to calm him down. His little pup body started to shake and his tail fell in between his legs. Just like last time. He let out a little whimper because he could no longer speak. How was he supposed to change back? Just when he thought about hiding under the bed, his bedroom door opened. His head snapped up and his heart skipped a beat. His dad entered with a plate full of food. Jacob, I know you're hungry, so He stopped when he found himself staring at a little puppy instead of his son. He pulled down his green framed glasses and looked at it with an intense stare. He saw how it was absolutely terrified. Scott quickly put the plate down and walked over. He sat down gently, not wanting to frighten it. He looked behind him to make sure nobody else had followed him upstairs before tenderly lifting it up and placing it on his lap. He gently began to stroke its ears that were flat to its head with fear. His eyes were very concerned when the little pup let out another small whimper. It's all right, he soothed with a very calming tone. Don't be scared. Jacob. Chapter 42. Jacob looked up to his dad when he heard him say his name. How could he possibly think this was his son? How could he know about this? You need to calm down. Scott continued to stroke his ears. He hated seeing him so terrified. You can't change back until you do. Jacob couldn't believe it. Maybe he was dreaming. However, he was still stressing about being a wolf. It felt too strange. Scott knew they didn't have a long time limit for him to be this way. So he lifted the pup up and held him out in front of him. Jacob's big brown eyes stared at his dad as he stared back. He examined his fur with an intrigued expression. He had so many questions for him, and he understood that his son would be feeling the same way. He shouldn't know about these supernatural beings, but he doesn't surprisingly. He knows a lot. Okay. He sighed when Jacob released another small whimper. I think we need to make a trip to Hunter's house. I know you said you had an argument, but I bet he's the only one who can calm you down. Jacob wished he could just talk to his dad as he stood with him cradled in his arms. I need to cover you up. He picked up a hoodie off the floor and started wrapping it around him. Is that okay? Jacob was still shaking and still. Very confused. But he nodded his little head for confirmation. Scott gave him a smile and made sure he didn't suffocate him. He understood that he had a lot of explaining to do, but he just needed to get to a better place, still he knew that what he said would fall on safe ears. Jake rested his nose against his dad's shirt. Smelling him was very comforting when he was freaking out so much. Scott turned and hurried downstairs. He was going to make a smooth out of the house without letting anyone know where he was going. He had a more important situation to handle than having dinner. He stopped, knowing that he'd have to pass the doorway where everyone was sitting. Stay quiet. He whispered and felt the pup in his arms stay very still. He then took a breath and walked past. He saw out of the corner of his eye that Grace spotted him. When he opened the front door, she called his name, but he ignored her and quickly shut it. He hurried over to the car and got in. Carefully, he placed the pup on the passenger seat and Jacob fought against the hoodie to pull it off his head. Scott didn't waste any time as he put on a seatbelt, started the car and reversed out of the driveway. It's really not healthy for the boys to have trust issues in a relationship like this. It is very powerful and it should be full of meaning. Flora sighed and stared at Hunter's closed bedroom door. Young Jacob still has a lot to get used to. My heart hurts every time I see him looking overwhelmed. I can't imagine how Hunter would feel. Margot sighed and leaned again thawny. That was a really heated argument. Flora sipped her tea but perked up a little bit when they heard a car engine. Sounds like you have a visitor. Everyone stopped when they heard a car door slam shut. Their gaze stared at the front door when the footsteps became louder. Anthony sat up when he smelt who it was. Jacob's dad. He mumbled, just as there were 3 loud knocks. He stood up, cleared his throat and walked over. He hoped that he wasn't here to be angry at the fact that the kids argued. He stopped and took a breath before pulling the handle and swinging the door open. "Oh hey, 𝐶𝐬." He stopped when he saw the pup in his arms. His heart instantly sped up and his eyes grew intense. That was a good sign. Scott smiled and surprisingly didn't look fazed. "I believe we have something to discuss." Anthony was shocked. Did Jacob accidentally change in front of his family? He stood back to let him in. He didn't have anything to say because he didn't know how much Scott knew. In theory, he shouldn't know anything. Margot and her husband shared the same expression when they spotted Jacob in his wolf form. However, Flora had never seen an alpha wolf with silver patches on it. My. She breathed and walked over. "Isn't he just precious?" Scott decided to put the pup down. He needed to explain a lot of things to Margot and Anthony. He also wondered if he was confident enough to walk because so far, he had only shaken and stayed stiff out of fright. Right now, Jacob only had one thing on his mind, and that was Hunter. His smell was driving him crazy and he couldn't stand not being able to hear him in among his thoughts. Everyone watched him clumsily try to use his leg to get closer to Hunter's room. It felt so odd to him, but he was determined. Even though his dad clearly holds a big secret, he needed to make things better with his werewolf. When he reached the door, he clawed at it, but Hunter was lying on his bed with headphones on. He could smell his mate, but he didn't want to talk to him. He was upset and Jacob had said some horrible things to him. He didn't want to make up just yet. After a minute or two, Jacob stopped. He could feel his sadness and he knew he was going to open it up for him. He turned and got a fright to see a big pair of Wellington boots right in front of him. Flora grinned and picked him up. "Let's get you calmed down." She beamed and took him over to the couch. "HS very fond of food, yes." "He is." Scott was aware that Margot and Anthony were watching him with caution, but he needed his son to change back before he could do or say anything. Flora retrieved some tender chicken from the fridge and brought it over. Jacob was half sitting on his dad as he began to feel his wolf traits taking a shine when he smelt the food. Scott watched him hesitate when it was placed next to him. "Eat it," he said softly and stroked his soft fur. "I know you're hungry." Jacob was starting to relax the longer he stayed as a wolf. Yes, it was an exceptionally bizarre feeling. Yet it was quite exciting too. He sniffed at the chicken and almost felt embarrassed at the thought of eating it with just his mouth. But he was a pup, so what else could he do? Scott looked satisfied when he slowly started to nibble on it, knowing it should help him to calm down. And it did. Jacob's great love was food, although he could feel that his feelings for Hunter were starting to overtake it. He wasn't quite ready to admit that as he lost self-control and chewed on a big piece of meat. His ears stopped laying flat against his head, but they were floppy and moved around as he chewed. He stopped shaking and Flora watched as his tail began to gently wag. "He really does love his food," she chuckled. "But those markings on his fur, they are so extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." "Me neither," Anthony mumbled and watched Scott carefully. Just when Jacob swallowed the food, he quickly changed into his human form and surprised everyone. He found himself pretty much sitting on his dad's knee. He looked at his body to check that everything was normal before moving to the side, so he was sitting on the couch. He rubbed his stomach with a frown. "That's digesting weird," he whispered. Margot jumped up to get him some water. It was never good to change in the middle of eating something, but seemed like the only way to settle him. There will be a time when he can control it as easy as breathing. "Let me get Hunter. He needs to know about what's going on." Anthony got up as Margot gave Jacob a drink. "How was that experience?" she asked with a smile. A bit better than the first time." Scott needed to understand how long this has been going on for. "Hunter." Anthony banged on his door. The wood vibrated on its hinges and sparked his interest. Even though he didn't hear it, he pulled off his headphones and listened. Hunter, there's a bit of a situation going on out here. You need to." His door opened to a foul-looking 18-year-old. He looked very moody as his eyes ignored his dad and aimed straight for Jacob. "I don't care. Tell me about it later," he muttered, but Anthony held the door open. "Now is not the time to hold grudges. You two need to make up before anything is said. He can't cope without your support." Jacob looked extremely apologetic. He didn't think he was capable of losing his temper like that, so he didn't really know how to deal with the consequences of someone being mad at him. "I don't want to make up right now," he grumbled and walked back over to his bed, knowing his dad wouldn't enter. "Jacob, come here please, come here please." Anthony sighed. Scott watched his son slowly peel himself off the couch. He didn't have his T-shirt on and he was still a little stunned about his growth spurt, but not as much as what he should be. Hunter avoided looking at his mate when Anthony gently pushed him into the room. However, he was topless and that made it harder for him. "Make up." Anthony crossed his arms and stood his ground. He felt impatient. He wanted to hear what Scott had to say and he wanted to hear it now. Jacob wrung his hands with nerves. He really hated being in this situation. Hunter, I really don't want to hear it, Jacob. Get out of my room." Hunter was feeling particularly cold-hearted right now, but Jacob was ready to settle this and he wouldn't stand for his tough grudge. "No," Hunter frowned. "Not expecting that." "I don't want." "You can't always get what you want." Jacob stared at him and tried his best to be confident. He took a breath and continued. "You didn't want a male mate, but you got one anyway. I didn't want to be a werewolf and brought into this, but I am whether I like it or not. I'm pretty sure you wanted someone a little more stable, but instead you got someone who pushes the ones they care about away because they can't handle being loved. I'm out of my depth and I don't feel good enough for you. So I pick arguments and find any excuse for you to hate me because it's what I'm good at. But you're not perfect either. So I'm stepping up and saying sorry because I made a stupid mistake. I'm just scared. I don't know what I'm doing. So I panicked. I feel awful and I really want to make up." Hunter's eyebrows had raised. He's never heard him speak so much in one go. He has never expressed himself to that extent before, and that's when he realized just how sorry he was. It's a big thing for Jacob to try and be vocal when he struggles so hard with it. Scott was surprised too. He has not heard his son say that much in a long time. Hunter's eyes stayed connected with his as he walked over. He was going to talk to him about his insecurities later, but right now, building their relationship was more important. "Can you please stop blaming me for everything? I know I haven't quite made it up to you for this past year, but you know how hard I'm trying. Can you also stop avoiding my touch when we get mad at each other? That infuriates me so much because it's the only thing that 𝐿 sorted out. And can you also never wear a T-shirt again?" The last comment caused Jacob to smile. "I am sorry for blaming you for everything. I'm not used to being in a relationship and it feels like a little too much sometimes. But I'll be better. I'm sorry." Hunter's heart melted. He couldn't hold it back and wrapped his arms around him. They both squeezed each other tight. The pain of their separation hurt more when they were not on good terms. "You're such a pain when you're angry." Hunter muffled into his neck. His lips had moved against his skin when he spoke, causing a shudder of pleasure to run down his mate's spine. "But I like that you're not afraid to defend yourself and you're getting more confident." "It's hot." Anthony shook his head. His son is such a flirt. Jacob rolled his eyes and pulled his head back. He studied his perfect features and his faultless skin. He knew he was lucky to have someone like Hunter who cared about him this much. "Right? Now that you two are not going to rip each other's heads off, I think Scott has something to tell us." Anthony turned and watched him. He couldn't sense anything about him. But then again, he couldn't with Jacob before the change happened. Hunter and Jacob followed him over and sat down. Scott didn't really like the silence and the judgmental eyes, but he had things to say, so he didn't hesitate to get started. "So I'm just going to cut this short and keep it simple. I have a lot for you all to understand, but first, I'll tell you what I know." He gave his son a smile. It was one filled with pride and reassurance. "I know you are werewolves. I know my son is mates with Hunter, and I know that something very unusual is happening with Jacob. In my family, we have a unique prophecy that should remain a secret until the time is right. And that happens to be now." Everyone watched him intensely, not knowing what he was going to say. "This secret has been passed on through generations," Scott continued. "And it stops at my son because he is the secret we've tried so hard to keep hidden. I'm aware that in this world, Not many believe about the gods and if they were ever real. But it gives me shivers to say that there's one in this room with us. Every Onis hair stood on end and they stared at Jacob, whose body was tingling. He almost held his breath, but his dad smiled at him once more, trying to keep him calm until he has stated everything that needs to be said. After changing into a werewolf, you may believe that you're only half, but you're not named Jacob because we simply liked the name. On your birth certificate, your real name is 𝐿𝐥𝐻𝐬. Margot gasped. She knew it. Jacob had stopped blinking while his mind was full to the brim. Now that he thought about it, he has never seen his birth certificate. He needed it for college, but his parents wouldn't give him it. Jacob. Scott's voice was gentle as he gained his son's concentration. You're not human. You're not a werewolf. I know you've all wanted answers for this, so here it is. He took a breath. He has waited to say this for 17 years. You are 𝐿𝐥𝐻𝐬, the keeper of lightning, and you are a full god of the werewolves.